Today I want to spend a little bit of time with you looking at a really important ecological feature of our game reserve, and that's the Bushman's River. Unfortunately, we've gone through quite a drought over the last number of years, but what it's allowed us to do is in fact access these areas. Good morning everyone, welcome back to another beautiful day on Shamwari Private Game Reserve. Today I want to spend a little bit of time with you looking at a really important ecological feature of our game reserve, and that's the Bushman's River. Unfortunately, we've gone through quite a drought over the last number of years, and a lot of the water has actually receded out of the river and most of the riverbed is dry. But what it's allowed us to do is in fact access these areas that over many years I haven't ever gone to them or seen them. And I want to have a look at how nature is utilizing a bad situation to its advantage, or indeed adapting to this drought that we're going through. And there's a lot of interesting features that are now getting exposed that we really haven't seen in the past. So Shamwari Private Game Reserve has approximately 26 kilometers of the Bushman's River flowing through the southern section of our game reserve. One of the reasons why it's important is for about 32 kilometers upriver from the entrance to the sea, the water is intertidal. Estuaries are really important in South Africa because of the biodiversity that is housed inside those estuaries. A massive amount of fish species from the ocean will utilize estuaries as nursery grounds. In other words, eggs will hatch there and the small little fish will survive in the safety of the estuaries until they can avoid other predators and then move out into the sea. So from a biodiversity point of view, estuaries are really important, and the further tide moves up into a river and down again, the larger the estuary is. So the Bushman's River is one of the most important in South Africa. Another really important thing when looking at rivers is how much water flows into the river. In other words, is the catchment area like a basket? Is it a really big basket that catches a massive amount of water every time it rains and funnels it down into the river? Or is it quite small? And for us, unfortunately, our catchment area is really tiny. It only covers about 2,600 square kilometers of ground, which sounds like a lot, but really it isn't. If you move off to the north and east of us, we've got the catchment area of the Great Fish River, and that is huge. It's over 30,000 square kilometers. And off to our west, we've got the Sundays River catchment area, and that's a little over 22,000 square kilometers. We are surrounded or encompassed by two very large catchment areas, which I think they take the lion's share of the water when it does rain. So as we spend the next few hours in the dry riverbed, we're going to be walking and driving. But one of the things I need to be really aware of is how rivers are utilized by animals. Not only the herbivores to come and find fresh food, because this is an area where there's still quite a lot of green grass as there's still moisture left in the ground, but also predators. And moving in and out, there's one way forward and there's one way back. You've got banks on either side of you. So from a safety point of view, we need to be really alert of what's going on. And you can see just how steep some of these banks are, that if we do bump into something, we're gonna have to be quite careful how we move. So just from a safety point of view, we wanna make sure that we're not, putting pressure on animals unnecessarily, as there is a drought, animals are looking for food. And obviously for us, we want to keep ourselves safe as well. So this is what I was talking about when I was saying how different animals are going to be utilizing this area. So if we look at the bottom of this riverbed over here, we've got this beautiful green grass that we're not seeing in too many other areas of the game reserve outside of the river because it's so dry. Animals want green grass. They'll choose green grass over dry grass any day, and it'll force them to come down into these areas. Obviously, there will always be animals that will traditionally use these types of areas. Kudus, bushbuck, duiker, they use the thicker bushes anyway, and riverine environments. And indeed here we can see there's a bushbuck that was killed more than likely by lions as animals are coming down here and feeding. So the predators will use this to their advantage. Remember what I said, the banks are so steep that some animals won't be able to get out really easily, and they use that as an environmental barrier. So half of the pride can come from one side and the other half can ambush from another side, and they have a much greater chance of catching their prey. So when we look at nature, we want to look at the bigger picture. We don't want to just look at one species or a really small thing or a really big thing. We want to look at how everything fits together. On previous episodes, we have spoken about the nutrient cycle and how everything in the bush gets utilized and returned back into the soil for nutrients. We did speak about horn moths and how the keratin sheaths of horns are broken down. But something quite interesting that you don't often see is these horn moth larvae have actually pupated. And there is the part of the cocoon that is left behind as the moth has pupated. It's hatched into a moth and it's flown off. It's just something quite cool. I don't often get to see that. So again, looking at how animals are utilizing different areas of the river. Here we've got a good steep bank on the side that's made out of clay, all of this deposited soil in that as the river has been eating through it in a way. And you can see this nice sized hole over here with quite a big height advantage off of the ground, and as well there's not too much above it. So that's a good safe thing. This is typical of what we see in kingfishers, probably a brown hooded kingfisher. So the nest has recently been used. I don't think there's anything in it at the moment. We've just come to the end of the breeding season where most of the chicks have already left the nests, and you can see there is active marks over here from the claws of the bird as it's been going in and out. There's no spider webs over the nest. A good safe environment. This would be difficult for predators to get into, and indeed a very, very safe place to rear a chick. One of the interesting things that you can see as a river system has dried up here is where I'm walking now, these hippo highways. What happens is when there's hippos living in an area, they like moving up and down the river in regular pathways. One of the benefits of these hippo highways is that they churn up the mud at the bottom of the water and they dig these channels. And indeed, it's quite an important ecological factor, because when you have water that's settled and you have fish living in it, fish like utilizing different levels of water at different times of the day and for different reasons. Some of it's for hunting, some of it's for laying eggs, some of it's to avoid predators, and indeed some of it's to catch prey. Different levels of water, and as you can see, the hippo is making deep water over here when this would be covered in water, allows fish to move in these deep channels or come up into the shallower areas over here. So another ecological advantage, and indeed a relationship. As one animal does something, so another animal utilizes it for their benefit or hunting or survival. So this pattern that you can see over here is such a characteristic view of what you would think typically of a drought-baked area. But surprisingly, it's actually quite interesting how much water is still left behind underground. As the water is receded and dried up from here, there's a very high clay content. And you can see just how much clay there is over there. And as water is added or taken away from clay, you have a massive expansion and contraction property of it, which causes this cracking pattern to happen. So as this contraction happens and you have these gaps opening up in here, a number of different animals will utilize this to their advantage to be able to survive the dry periods. They will go down into these cracks and they will estivate. Estivate is a term, the opposite of hibernation, not for cold but for hot. And they will go down here and estivate to avoid the hot temperatures and lack of water. They will find a safe, protected environment, and they can then estivate there in peace and quiet and stay there for some instances many months, in other instances sometimes years, until the next rains arrive and the animal will then step back into action. So something that I have to talk about is a healthy ecosystem. A river is a living organism. You know, a river is not just the water, it's everything that interacts with it. It's the abiotic and the biotic factors. The abiotic meaning the non-living things. Things like the rocks, the geology, the water, all the non-living components that add to a river system. And then the biotic factors are all the living things, all the microorganisms, the invertebrates, the vertebrates, and all of their interactions really make up a very, very complex system. And you have to look after it. It doesn't matter how well we look after this area here, a lot of what happens is what's brought in from outside. And as the world is becoming more and more aware of contaminants and plastics and pollutants, a river system is so fragile because everything that you do in your area, whether you throw poison down a drain or oil down a drain or rubbish down a stormwater drain, whatever it may be, that has to go somewhere. And those microparticles of plastics and contaminants, they all have to go somewhere, and they flow into our ecosystems, into our rivers, and they obviously cause problems. So we want to make sure that a river system is as healthy as possible, as pollutant free as possible, and everyone can play their little part around the world just by being aware of what they're throwing away and where they're throwing it away. So we're coming across these sporadic pools of water. They are very small, but they're still very important, and you can see the amount of life that is around over here. It's just brimming with life at the moment. Animals that are using it at the moment. There's a ton of bees over here, all taking water out. It has to go back to the hive. They're really trying hard to make honey before winter time. There's wasps over here. They're collecting mud, and a lot of them are potter wasps and mason wasps. They're making basically cells out of mud that they will be able to lay their eggs in, that are filled with caterpillars and spiders, that type of stuff. And you can see all of the mud around here that's been disturbed. There's warthog footprints, there's elephant footprints, there's a hippo footprint over there, there's rhino over here. As animals are coming down to utilize these last little bits of water, which are so important to them, so the predators are using it to their advantage as well. So something that we've seen a lot of is as the water has receded, and indeed oxygen levels have been depleted and temperatures went to unmanageable levels for the fish, a lot of them have died and a lot of them have succumbed to predation by things like otters, fish eagles, and then obviously the scavengers are utilizing it as a field day for free food, easy access to high protein stuff. And we're seeing a lot of this stuff over here is part of what's left behind from a sharp-toothed catfish, and then it looks like quite a large carp over there with the large scales indeed over here. There's part of a skeleton, and you can see those large scales from the carp. So different species of fish obviously have been affected in different ways, but nothing would have been wasted and left behind. The otters would have utilized it, hyenas would have used it. We've seen a lot of hyenas in the riverline basically accessing this high protein source. Jackals have been down here, they're obviously moving through here as well. Perched about 20 meters up on the bank looking down onto a group of hippos, and this is one of the last big pools of water that we have available to them. So this is quite a difficult site, but we're in one or two of the largest pools of soupy water. There's a group of hippos here, there's another quite a large group of hippos over there. You can see through there's another group, and I suppose they all have the uneasy, amicable truth of we're quite tightly packed, so let's make the best of it. Tensions are high. Drought is a factor from a guiding point of view, particularly when you're walking on foot, as to a stress that can induce reactions and aggression as animals are feeling cornered in that. So we are quite far away. They do know that we're here, but I'm not going to go close. I don't even want to go to this large group over here because it means we need to breach this line of bushes, and that'll make them feel really exposed, and I just don't want to put that pressure on them. But this is the water situation as it's drying up for these hippos. So we obviously is part of nature. It's part of the cycle. There are other areas that the hippos can go to, other permanent dams and water sources, which they will start. You know, obviously animals are creatures of habit and would have utilized this area as part of their core territory. And you know, the river's been slowly receding over the last number of years. So when it gets to a state where it just becomes uninhabitable or just, you know, really not nice for them, they'll move out and they'll find other water sources, dams, and other permanent watering holes that they'll be able to utilize. I think the hippos that are left here now for the water that is here, this is now the numbers they find with it. And you know, any non-territorial bulls or sick or animals that aren't strong enough to hold an area in here, they would have been pushed out already. So this is the group of stable animals that are here, and everyone's kind of on an uneasy peace at the moment. So another really interesting feature on Shamwari Game Reserve is the geology. There are three main rock types that you get. There's igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary. Igneous rocks are formed by volcanic action, lava, that type of stuff, so really quite violent actions. Then metamorphic rocks are taking one rock and through heat or pressure or compression changing it into another form of a rock. And then you get sedimentary rocks, and a large percentage of Shamwari is made up of sedimentary rocks. That's much more conducive to the formation of fossils. A lot of what we have is sandstones, mudstones, siltstones, conglomerates, and this over here is a whole entire tree that has been fossilized. This formation that we're sitting in is the Kirkwood Formation. The Kirkwood Formation has been really prolific in the amount of fossils that have been exposed in it and we've been able to find. It's quite a large formation that runs through the reserve. We found a myriad of different fossils, everything from tons of these fossilized trees all the way up to vertebrate from an Algosaurus. An Algosaurus was a huge tetrapod. And this area, we're looking at about 120 to 145 million years ago. And it's only really that the water has receded that these types of things are exposed that we're able to see. So bittersweet, we really want the water, we need the rain, we want this river to flow, but exciting in that we've been able to walk down and drive down so many different areas and see so many interesting things. We'll see you soon. Hello everyone, my name's Andrew Kearney. I'm the Ranger Manager at Shamwari Private Game Reserve. I just want to take a moment to say thank you very much for all the support and feedback that we've been getting on our brand new channel, Shamwari TV. If you haven't followed us yet, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and hit that notification bell. Stay tuned for our next episode, and I'll see you right here at Shamwari Private Game Reserve.